What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Marvel Madness. Welcome to Project Potter. My name is Kyler, host, guys. As you can tell, we kind of continue to mess around with different backgrounds or shots here. Rearrange the living room a little bit since the last time I recorded, and it is a little hard to get the shot that's far back. So we're gonna kind of roll with this. We can't really see the MCU down here, but we roll with it, guys. This is our Marvel What If in review. Thanks for checking out the channel, guys. If you guys do like the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Hopefully I'm not being cut off on the shot here. If you haven't seen the show before, guys, it is a rambling recap. This is going to be a very quick recap because there's really not much that goes on in this episode plot-wise. We do a favorite character, a weakest character, a score out of 10, and that's pretty much it. So kicking it off here with a rambling recap here, guys. The premise of this is that Thor is an only child, so Odin brings Loki instead of taking him as a frost giant, which was always kind of a weird move if we're being real. He gives him back to the frost giants, and they're like, oh, cool. Thor is an only child. He becomes a party prince because Loki doesn't keep him in check, which I guess makes sense. But basically the premise is, guys, that Thor goes and meets all these people. Like Korg is in here, and he goes to see what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy, Yondu. All the different characters, the Guardians, of course, like Rocket and Drax, and I don't think we see Star-Lord in this one, but he basically goes and parties everywhere, and then he partied so hard that like the asteroid blew up or something, and he was like, well, it was going to explode anyway. He's like, we just gave it a little push. And so Chris Hemsworth returns as Thor, and he's always great. We get a lot of familiar faces, or a lot of familiar voices as well. We get Darcy, we get Jane Foster, we get Agent Coulson in here, we get Maria Hill, we get Nick Fury. I think those are kind of the big names there, but we get Captain Marvel, of course, too. And yeah, Thor basically is just, he comes to the Midgard, and they're like, oh my god, they see like the Bifrost come down, and they're like, this is the first contact, and he goes, people of Midgard, he's like, prepare to party, and I'm like, alright, I mean, we'll get into it later, but basically, guys, Thor ends up wrecking the stuff. The Ragnarok guy that he sees in the beginning ends up like hitting on the Statue of Liberty, which is a good little bit, but they kind of end up wrecking things because Thor's like, watch me go down this thing, and he goes to Australia and like the Sydney with the Opera House or whatever. He tries to go down that, and they go in the Golden Gate Bridge, and they start like take out a bunch of power lines, which like wipes out electricity. Eventually, Jane falls in love with Thor. Darcy and her have a back and forth where she's like, oh, I didn't expect him to look so, and she's like, what, like Abercrombie model? She's like, I can go on. She says a bunch of different things, but basically Darcy feels like she belongs in this world because she's like so over the top that this actually kind of fits. Jane is mostly the same, but she's kind of got her reservations too. But she's really into Thor as she is, and as Natalie Portman is into Chris Hemsworth in the movies either way. So that kind of holds true, but basically Jane eventually calls up Frigga, who is Thor's mom, and she's like, hey, not to be that person, but she goes to their wine party, and then she's like, is that Chardonnay? And she's like, a form of it, and she starts drinking. She's like, Thor's on Earth, he's in trouble, like, you gotta come here. And then Thor finds out about this, and he's like, my mom's coming home, we gotta clean everything up. And it's like a Ferris Bueller's Day Off sort of thing, and it's an okay idea, but it's just kind of goofy. We get some really cool moments where Loki is just a giant frost giant now. He grew up, and he's like brother. He's like brother from another mother. He's like, you know me. And so Thor and Loki still have that kind of same rapport. And Tom Hiddleston returns as Loki, which is always great. And he's like, Loki's just the best. And I'm like, Loki is the best, dude. And so they have this kind of ongoing thing. But then when it's time to clean up, Thor, he's like, my mom's coming. Everyone has to stay here and clean up. And Loki's like, that's not my mom. He's like, peace out. Frigga returns home from the Bifrost. She's in the Bifrost for like 25 years, dude. Like, I don't know why it's taking so long. We do get Heimdall, and it's funny because she's like, Heimdall's watching, and it's like, it cuts to his eyes. And I don't think we have any lines from Idris Elba in this one, but Heimdall is always awesome. And so Jane ends up going to Asgard too. And if this is out of place, guys, this is a Project Potter review, so I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, Jane ends up going through the Bifrost because she says Heimdall, and she like gets the waves out to Heimdall, and then goes to tell Frigga. Frigga comes over, and then like right as she lands, of course, they're like cleaning everything up, and then she lands, and Thor is like, oh yes, and oh, this is my mother, and everyone say hello mother, and hello mother, and he's like, oh yes, we're just learning, and he's like, what do I always say? Learning is magic. And it's a funny, it's like I love Chris Hemsworth Thor. Like, this is Ragnarok Thor. Like, I love this personality. I didn't mention, guys, Project Potter review once again. There's a huge fight scene with Captain Marvel and Thor, but it's really forced and really dumb, and like Captain Marvel ends up losing because Thor just drops the hammer on her at the end, which is funny. But I think she's holding back, but it's like Maria Hill tells her, like, you were supposed to be the nuke. Fury said, like, you could, your cat could swallow whole universes or whatever. And Darcy's like, you fought a cat? She's like, what was his name? And it's obviously the cat from Captain Marvel, which isn't really a cat, but the one that got Fury's eye taken off. So that stuff is okay. Captain Marvel felt kind of forced, but yeah, basically she gets home. Captain Marvel brings like the tablet, and she's like, oh, here's all the information needed on human civilization or whatever. And he's like, oh, so tiny, but so much information. He's like, thank you. And then basically they get away with, they almost get away with it. And then they're like, okay, time to go. Because Frigga's like, I'm so proud of you for educating my son or whatever. And then he's like, oh, one more thing I almost forgot. And he like calls Mjolnir. And there's like party ribbons and shit on it. And he's like, and she's like, come with me. And basically Thor is grounded, but that is how the episode ends. Hey guys, my strongest character for this one, dude, it had to be Loki. Like, it's always Loki. Loki as a giant frost giant was awesome, but he was just like really funny scenes where he's got like the little Earth phone and Jane's calling him, and he's like Loki's phone, or he's like Thor's phone, and she's like, oh, can I talk to Thor? And he's like, oh, are you Thor's new love interest? He's like giving kisses to the phone, and she's like, oh, stop. And he's like, do you have a friend? He's like, we can do a double date. And I'm like, dude, I love Tom Hiddleston so much. He ends up dropping the little phone. He's like, oops. And then we get the Grandmaster in here too, but he doesn't have any, he has like very few lines. There is a great line though where he says like, we're taking the scoots too, or whatever. And they like walk away, they like drive away with the little scooters that you get from like Walmart at the shopping bins. That's funny. But Loki is the best character, dude. I mean, Tom Hiddleston, I can't get enough Tom Hiddleston right now. So to see him in a different form, I thought for this episode, because there was no Loki, I was like, oh no, we're not going to get any Tom Hiddleston. It's like, there is Loki, it's just not the Loki we know, it's Loki Frost Giant, but he's like the same personality, which is funny. And, oh, sorry, one thing I didn't mention too, guys, is that at the very end there, the Watcher comes in and he's like, oh, and they lived happily ever after. He's like, wait, what? And then who shows up, dude? But Ultron, actually, it's Vision in Ultron's body. It's like Ultron's suit pops open in Vision's head, and he's got all the Infinity Stones, and you're like, oh shit. So is that going to end abruptly, or is it going to carry over? We'll see. It's a really cool idea. I don't know what the show's going for anymore, but yeah, this is my long-winded answer of saying that Tom Hiddleston as Loki, a Frost Giant, was the best character. As for the weakest character, guys, I have to say it's Captain Marvel. I don't know why she was in here. It's like they just put in there just so they can have like a meaningless fight of like, guess what? Thor's super powerful, but guess what? Captain Marvel is too, and they have a weird fight, but it's like, I don't know, man. Captain Marvel just doesn't do it for me. And I love Brie Larson, like I do, but her character just either way overpowered or just like, I just don't care for it. I know she has like powers from the Tesseract, so it makes sense, but I just don't ever care when Captain Marvel comes in, and I don't know if that's just a me problem, but I didn't love Captain Marvel. Where are you? Right there. Didn't love that movie. That's one of my least favorite MCU movies. Again, maybe that's a me problem, but yeah, I just thought she was the weakest character. I didn't really think she needed to be in this one, and out of all the characters that they had, I just thought she was the weakest. Okay, guys, that brings us to a score. For this one, man, this show... Also, full disclosure, guys, I just finished watching Star Wars Visions, so those reviews should be coming up soon. Star Wars Visions was amazing. After watching Visions and watching this is like so cartoony, and the style, which I really liked at the beginning, it doesn't feel great. These are getting very inconsequential for me, and so I'm just watching these and kind of like, this one almost felt like a waste of time, or like I didn't hate the episode. There were some funny moments, but it feels like I miss my live action consequential MCU where everything's connected and everything's going up. This is like, oh, you like these characters? Okay, here's a little bit more. And so I've talked about that in the past, but it's getting bad for me where I'm like, I'm not even almost really excited to like watch these shows anymore. So it's taking the characters I love, but it's not really doing justice to these characters. Like where the Disney Plus shows, like Loki, WandaVision, and Falcon Winter Soldier, those gave us more of the live action, like that we didn't get to spend time with before. This is just kind of like, oh yeah, it's sometimes it's characters, sometimes they're doing weird things, but What If is a really cool idea, but I don't think they're executing very well. This is a 6.4 for me. I didn't care for this episode. This was the one I could have done without, and so it's a cool idea, and there was a couple of funny moments. Like I liked when she was like coming through the Bifrost, and then Thor was like, oh, and he's like trying to scrub, and he's like nervous. That was funny, but it didn't get like I don't. If the MCU was cheesy and goofy and funny all the time, I wouldn't like it as much. It's when you mix in parts of comedy with the MCU where you have a really dark story, a really great heroic story, and then you have comedy. Like that's why Ragnarok is so good, because Ragnarok is hilarious, but it's about meeting like Valkyrie. It's about meeting the Grandmaster. It's about stopping Ragnarok, because at the end of that movie, Thanos' ship shows up, and so it's like that's really like kind of a tragic story, even though it's like based around comedy. But this was just too much comedy. So I don't know. I just thought this was the worst one yet. Okay, guys, that's another episode of Marvel Madness. Thanks for checking out the channel. Thanks for checking out the content. Hopefully, this is not a super weird angle. I obviously will have to record or edit it, so I don't know how it's going to look. It could look terrible. If it does, apologies. I'll try and mess with the look for next week. But thanks for checking out the channel, guys. Go check out the other content. Like, comment, subscribe if you did enjoy it. And until next time, guys, what if?